soon-to-be ex-husband's world crumbled after his cousin exposed his abscess on audio, leaving him alone and ostracized. My ex was the ultimate narcissistic mama's boy, and any time things didn't go his way, he'd throw an epic tantrum. His mother was just the same, the two of them feeding off each other's drama. But in the beginning, he'd swept me off my feet. He married me knowing I had a son, and for a little while, everything seemed normal. It all changed when I got pregnant with our daughter. Suddenly, he stopped being a husband. He'd spend hours at his parents' house after work. His dad was on the night shift, so it would just be him and his mother. He'd get off work at 3 p.m., and I wouldn't see him until 7, just as I was putting my son to bed and collapsing into my own from exhaustion. When my daughter was born, everything reached another level. I almost died during her birth, and after that, I just needed her close to me. Naturally, I became clingy with her. His mother threw a fit, complaining to all her friends that I was being disrespectful. The rest of the family understood what I'd been through. My father-in-law, bless him, was a gentle soul who happened to choose crazy for a wife. She guilted him into staying by playing up her blindness. He tried leaving her once or twice, but she always managed to reel him back in. He loved my son and stood by me every step of my pregnancy, as well as when we were going through my son's autism diagnosis. My own family lived in another state, so during those times it was endless check-ins over the phone but never that comfort of having them nearby. Years sped by. The kids grew older, my daughter turned 4, my son 8. By then my husband had already transformed into this angry, unhelpful stranger. The violence started to creep in bit by bit, until I found myself getting in between him and the kids. Then came the family trip. It was never supposed to be a family trip, just me, his cousin, and the kids, because my husband supposedly couldn't get time off work, which I was secretly relieved about. But suddenly his mother decided to come. She's blind and diabetic, so of course my ex manages to get the time off now. The whole trip became a disaster, constant fighting, the only highlight for my kids being that they got to pet a penguin. On the way home, my ex sat between the kids in the backseat. They just wanted their dad to hold their hand and fall asleep, and he snapped at them. I argued with him to switch seats, and his mother jumped in, too. When I turned to tell her to stay out of it, she went full-on wild, scratching my face with her nails, grabbing my hair, and taking swings at me. I knocked her block off, sunglasses and all. Victim mode instantly, she wailed, and I forced my ex to move seats. After that, the only one I spoke to was my father-in-law. I told my ex he could move back in with his parents. He came crawling back, promising anger management, but when I insisted on a licensed counselor, he settled for some church program at his parents' church and gave up halfway through. Meanwhile, he kept being the same threatening, violent man, and I was constantly stepping between him and the kids. Finally, I broke down and called his dad, poured out everything, and told him I was done. I'd pack up the kids and we'd leave for my parents' state. He wanted to see firsthand how the kids responded to my ex. So, we had a family dinner. The kids were laughing, having fun with their pawpaw. The second my ex walked in, they stopped cold and glued themselves to their grandfather. All happiness vanished. As soon as he saw it, my father-in-law took my ex outside and spelled it out. If I ever called the cops, my ex was just going to rot in jail. Of course, that only worked for a week. One morning he snapped at my son and threw him to the floor. He almost broke my baby's arm. My whole body went cold. I rushed my son to the ER, my ex followed, trying to control everything, but even the nurses saw something was terribly off with how the kids acted. My daughter refused to stay with him and wouldn't let go of me while my son got x-rayed and his arm casted, a real comet-breaking point. That's when his cousin, who's also a cop, and one of my biggest supporters, started helping me pack little by little. We'd sneak bags into the car when my ex wasn't around. Then came the day I finally left. I went to pick my son up from school, and his teacher wanted to talk to me about how my son's demeanor had changed, and the bruises. I broke down right there, telling her I was leaving with him for good. We made it to my parents' house in another state. The kids finally began to come out of their shells, but there were signs of all the trauma. My daughter was terrified to go to the bathroom. My son screamed if we tried to get him to shower, he'd only tolerate baths. Both of them tore up or threw away anything their father sent them. They never told me what had really happened, but I had my dad sit down and talk to them, and so much terrible truth came spilling out, details I'll never repeat. After that, I got a restraining order. His response? Divorce papers. Then his mother sent me a text, a stupid attempt to manipulate me, saying the only reason they'd filed was to get me to drop the protection order. I fired back a middle finger emoji and sent a screenshot to my lawyer. I got my kids into counseling and, over the next 6 years, my ex played the victim, painting himself as the hero to his family while privately barely showing any remorse. His cousin, the one who helped me escape, had finally had enough. She asked if she could tell everyone the truth, play the audio recording of my daughter at age 6, begging her grandparents to believe her. Before anything, I talked it over with my daughter. She's 12 now and we share everything. She told me, I want them to know. It turns out my ex's father's extended family had started to distance themselves after my mother-in-law, the matriarch, died at 89. But my daughter's recorded story was the final straw. Now, my ex and his family find themselves ostracized from almost all family gatherings, except a few with his mother's side. Even then, if certain supportive cousins are invited, my ex and his parents aren't. There are so many people who wonder why I didn't leave sooner. The truth, I was threatened so many times, by him, and by his mother, that if I ever dared leave, they'd take my daughter away. I tried to leave so many times before, even while pregnant, but he always swore he'd change. He never did. And he never finished those church anger classes, never once went to a real therapist or counselor. Over time, my ex's father's side of the family, especially the cousins, started confiding in me all the dark things they'd known and wished they'd told me earlier. His cousins became my biggest support and helped raise money so I could escape while the kids were still young. Thanks to therapy, the kids have come so far. My daughter, so incredibly perceptive, knows exactly how their father tries to manipulate her. She's learned all her rights, knows at 12 she can tell the courts how she feels, and is even writing a letter with her therapist releasing all her feelings. She knows, too, she has until 26 to press charges, just in case. Smart kid. As for my autistic son, we talk about what happened. The past is never easy to face, but now we're safe, he's healing, and for the first time, his laughter fills the house again. My son looked up at me with wide, trusting eyes and told me, "Mommy, I am safe with you, sissy," and Peppa. He meant my dad. Hearing that from him, after everything we've been through, let me know we're healing, both the kids and me. Let me clear up the confusion about that vacation. My ex had always worked for his grandmother, who ran a huge grocery store in our community. He absolutely refused to use his college degree and become a teacher. Why? Lazy. Pure and simple. It was easier for him to just show up at the family store and argue with his uncle, the other owner, instead of actually working. The two of them fought all the time because he always found reasons to duck out of real responsibilities. He came along on that trip only because his grandmother didn't want me and his cousin taking care of his dramatic mother. Those were Granny's words, she really didn't like his mom. To be fair, his mother was a spectacle wherever she went, always bringing some new crisis. On the ride home from our trip, he was sitting between our son and daughter. My kids were still so young then, my son in first grade and my daughter in second. They were so used to me being there, sitting close, holding their hands until they fell asleep. That comfort was everything to them. This time, they wanted to hold hands like always, but my ex got irritated. He got pissed, right there in the car. I tried to defuse the situation, asking him to help with simple things like changing the sheets, but he started yelling. That's when the fighting started between us. I always hear people say, "You just watched him abuse them." But that's not the full truth. He was a coward. Most of the time, he'd wait until I wasn't there before he did anything. He knew I wouldn't tolerate it. I had kicked his ass a few times and he remembered it. So, the abuse happened in the shadows. When I was out, there was the constant chaos with his family. My father-in-law asked me to keep an eye on my mother-in-law's blood sugar at night because she kept having these suspicious hypoglycemic lows. Turns out, she was purposely overdosing her insulin to get extra attention. My Phil suspected as much. That woman was jealous of everything, attention, affection, you name it. So, yes, if I was home, I fought him off my kids. I did everything I could to protect them while I was getting ready to leave, but even then, Child Protective Services had come to our house several times. Every time, he shut me down and managed to charm his way out of trouble. I never had a chance to really explain what was happening. But now, with the kids finally relaxing, with my son telling me he feels safe with me, I know we're on the right path, one step, one day at a time. I thought the quiet would last longer, but it didn't. He filed an emergency motion claiming I was alienating the kids, and just like that, we were back in a courthouse. My daughter had already been working on her letter with her therapist, but when she heard there'd be a judge, she asked if she could speak. 12 years old, hair in 2 messy braids, butterfly clips she stole from my drawer years ago, and a spine made of iron. My son clutched his fidget cube the entire morning and sat on my dad's lap, cheek pressed to his chest like he was trying to listen for a safe heartbeat. His mother showed up in head-to-toe drama, sunglasses in a courtroom, that cane clicking on purpose, guiding herself directly to the front row. His dad stood in the back, quiet, that man who spent a lifetime apologizing without words. My ex strutted in late like he owned the building. He had a new cross necklace on. He always buys one when he's about to lie. The judge called us in, and I swear the temperature in that room dropped 10 degrees the second my daughter opened her mouth. She didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She asked the judge if she could sit at the table instead of across the room. The judge said yes. She took out her letter and said, "I can read it, but I don't want him hearing the parts that are just for grown-ups who care." The judge sent my ex and his mother into the hallway. His mother gasped like she'd been shot. The bailiff didn't blink. My daughter read the first paragraph, the part about how she hates the smell of his cologne now and how her stomach turns every time she hears a truck like his pass by, and then she stopped and handed the rest to the judge. He read silently. He put his hand over the page at one point and told her, "Thank you." The room was so quiet I could hear my son's little cube clicking. The judge asked if she wanted to say anything else. She looked up and said, "If you make me, I'll run." Not a threat, not a performance, just fact. Even writing this, my hands shake. The guardian ad litem had already interviewed both kids and my dad, and after hearing my daughter, She asked to play the audio my cousin had from years ago, the one of my girl at 6, begging her grandparents to believe her. The judge listened to 30 seconds and said that was enough. He didn't need to hear a child beg to do his job. They brought my ex back in for his turn, and he tried to smile at my daughter. She looked past him like he was a smudge on glass. He started with the usual concern, fingers steepled, that low voice he uses when he's lying about hurting someone. He said I was poisoning them against him, that I'd always resented his mother's involvement, that I was keeping family from family. The judge leaned forward, hands folded, and asked him if he'd completed licensed counseling as he'd reported. He started in about his church classes again. The judge asked for certificates or therapist notes. He had nothing. The judge asked if he'd ever raised a hand to my son. He said no. The guardian ad litem cleared her throat and asked permission to enter photos from the ER visit, the radiology notes, and a screenshot of an old group chat my cousin dug up where he joked about finally breaking the boy of those tantrums with old school discipline. My ex's lawyer went still. His mom started whisper shouting my name from the pews until the bailiff told her if she opened her mouth again, she was out. The judge ruled right then. Sole legal and physical custody to me. Supervised visits only, at the center, no third-party supervisors, no grandmother present, no unscheduled calls. He ordered a psych evaluation for my ex, real anger management with a licensed provider, and said the restraining order would remain in full force, no new numbers, no oops wrong person, group texts, no messages through concerned family. He told my daughter she would never be forced to hug anyone. He told my son he was brave. When my son heard the word brave, he looked at the judge like someone had handed him a sword. In the hallway, his mother started. She launched into the same lines she's said for a decade, that I am vindictive, that I corrupted her sweet boy, that she has always been sick and I've never shown mercy. She forgot where she was and called the judge a fool. 2 deputies walked her out while she told the ceiling how mistreated she was. My ex tried to hand my daughter a locket as we left, sneaking it from his pocket like a magician, and she stepped backward behind my dad and said, "No." It wasn't dramatic. It was simple. He still flinched. 2 days later, he violated the order. New number, same old mess. He texted at 11:13 p.m., "I love you baby girl, don't let mommy turn you cold." He sent my son a picture of a toy he knows my boy used to love, with a winky face. My cousin came over in plain clothes with a recorder and watched me call it in. She kept her face neutral while I shook. When the officers served the warrant, he was at the family store, arguing like always, one foot on a crate, telling my uncle-in-law how nobody had the right to tell him how to parent. They took him right there, in front of the produce. Bananas and a man in cuffs. It wasn't satisfying like in movies. It was just quiet in my chest. Like a door clicked shut. The store, by the way, finally took its own turn. Granny's estate wrapped, and there was no windfall like he'd promised his mother for years. She used to wave it in my face, "Just wait until the will, you'll see." Turns out, Granny had written a letter to be read to the owners, my uncle-in-law and the accountant, about anyone who brings shame to this family or harm to children, and while it wasn't a legal document, those men took it like the gospel. They ran an audit. They found cash discrepancies that had his initials all over them and enough time card mistakes to build a tower. He wasn't charged for that, yet, but he was fired. Officially. The sign on the door changed 2 days later. Under new management. My uncle-in-law told me he should have done it years ago, but he could hear Granny's voice in his head now, and it was finally louder than my mother-in-law screaming. And then my father-in-law did something I never thought I'd see. He called my dad, not me, and asked if he could talk to the kids over FaceTime. No one else on the line. He started by apologizing to my son. Not on behalf of anyone. Just from himself. My son hid his face in a blanket and peeked out one eye. My daughter sat beside him with her arms crossed, ready to pounce if needed. He said, "I should have walked out with you and carried you both when you were small. I didn't. That's on me." My daughter asked him if he was still living with her grandmother. He said no. Quietly. He said, "I packed a bag and left the house. I have a place by the river. If I get to see you someday, I will come to you. I won't ask you to come to me." My daughter nodded once. My son asked him to show his fishing pole. That was the first time my boy smiled on a video call in years. My father-in-law sent me a text after that call and said he'd testify if needed. He said he'd already spoken to the guardian ad litem. He was tired of being afraid of a woman who used fear to feel powerful. The kids keep surprising me. My son took a shower the day after court without screaming. He picked out his own shampoo, watermelon, and sang "You Are My Sunshine" off key. He kept saying, "Brave boy," to himself like he was practicing a new language. My daughter asked me to start the paperwork to change her last name. She said she wants my maiden name. Then she said maybe she wants both names, because she likes my dad's last name too and Pepa deserves that honor. 12 going on 90, and somehow still a kid who wants glitter Crocs. We had one supervised visit. 1. He showed up 10 minutes late to the center with a bag of dollar store candy he knows is on my son's sensory no-go list. My daughter sat with her hands in her hoodie. The monitor took notes. My ex tried coaxing with sugar, then guilt, then God. My son turned his chair to face the wall. My daughter stood up and told the monitor she didn't feel safe. The visit ended. The report will go to the judge. He will have another chance only if he completes the evaluation and starts real counseling. He won't. He can't sit in a room where the mirror talks back. My cousin found something else, too. An old phone backup from the store's office computer with a video of my ex and his mother laughing about how people blow stuff out of proportion and act like a bruise is a broken arm. I sent it straight to my lawyer. I won't get into the rest of it. Not here. Some things are going to be for the DA and for the kid's therapist, and if my daughter decides to press charges when she's ready, she will do it with her head high and an army behind her. For now, it sits in a file with the letter she gave the judge and the hospital records and a PSA printout of the exact language from the restraining order he keeps insisting doesn't apply to him. The last piece, the one I didn't know I needed, came on a random Tuesday. School pickup. My son hustled out with paint on his shirt and a new book squeezed like a treasure. My daughter had her backpack slung over one shoulder, her earbuds in, and she looked for me first, not over her shoulder. No scanning the parking lot for a truck. No flinch when a door slammed. She got in the car and said, "Papa's coming this weekend, right?" He promised pancakes. My dad makes them too thin and flips them too early and swears the black spots are caramelization. The kids love them like they're made of gold. She laughed. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It sounded like a door creaking open and a house taking a breath after years of holding it. So that's where we are. The truth is out in rooms it mattered most, courtrooms and offices and family kitchens. The people who want to be in my kids' lives are showing up with quiet hands and steady schedules instead of promises. The people who don't belong are finally being told no by someone other than me. My son told me that night, in the dark, when the fan was clicking and my dad was singing in the other room, "Mommy, tomorrow can be normal." I said yes, and it wasn't a lie. Not anymore. I should have known quiet has an expiration date. It lasted 8 days. On the 9th, the school called at 1:14 p.m. The secretary had that slow, careful voice people use when they're reading something dangerous while smiling at a stranger. She said, "We have someone here to pick up your children." I told her both kids ride the bus. She lowered her voice another notch and said, "She says she's their grandmother." I could hear the cane before I heard her voice. The school has glass doors that make a sound when someone taps them hard with anything. Tick. Tick, tick. Then that performative sigh, that church whisper at full volume. They're my babies. My daughter-in-law is vindictive. The secretary put me on hold and I listened to the chime of the front desk bell and the way every woman in that office took a deeper breath at the same time. I called my cousin before I stood all the way up. She was already in the car. "I'm 4 minutes away," she said, like a GPS. I told the secretary to pull the folder. The protective order, the pickup list with 3 names on it, me, my father, and the cousin. The principal came on the line, said the kids were safe, that they'd moved my son to the art room and my daughter to the counselor's office. "This is a soft hold," she said, "not a lockdown," like she knew I needed the difference. I could picture my son with paint on his sleeve again and my daughter sitting with her jaw set, and I sat down on the floor of my kitchen because the room buckled for a second. By the time I reached the school, the front entryway was full of sunlight and tension. My ex's mother had planted herself in a chair and angled her face toward the ceiling like she was waiting for a dove to descend. Oversized sunglasses, lipstick on her teeth, the cane propped across her lap like a scepter. When she heard my voice, she tilted her head, theatrically, and started in with the lines I've heard for a decade. "You don't know what you're doing to them." She reached, hand extended to the air, for a child who wasn't there. The SRO stepped forward, quiet as a wall. My cousin took the other side, badge out. The principal handed her a paper, trespass notice, signed. My ex's mother tried the old trick, clutched her stomach, whispered about her sugar, put the cane on the floor like she was going to slide to it. The SRO said, "Ma'am, you may call an ambulance from the sidewalk." They walked her out. She filled the foyer with sniffling and declarations about blindness and mercy, and then the door closed and all that air sat back down. My daughter texted me from the counselor's office, "She's not allowed in here." I typed back, "She's not allowed anywhere." My son, when the teacher brought him out, hid his face in my stomach for a full minute and then asked if he could bring his painting home. It was 3 crooked sunflowers and a smear of blue sky and he held it like evidence of a day he had saved. 2 hours after that, my ex tried to call from a new number. He left a voicemail, all low-voiced concern. He does a weird thing where he makes his vowels rounder when he's about to betray himself. "I heard there was a situation at the school," he said, pretending not to breathe into the phone. It was 100% certain his mother called him from the sidewalk. I forwarded it to my lawyer and then to the prosecutor's office, because the judge had been very specific. No new numbers, no triangulation through drama. Court again, fast-tracked because of the school and the violation. He showed up in his costume, clean work boots he only wears to look honest and a leather-bound Bible that still creaked when he opened it. He had a different lawyer, this one with a haircut that cost more than my first car. The psych eval report was already in the file. The judge read from it like he was reading a weather report he'd seen 100 times. Limited insight. Externalization of blame. Defensive presentation. Elevated aggression scores. Poor compliance with treatment recommendations. He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at my daughter, sitting next to the guardian ad litem with her knees pulled up in a little ball, and he said, "I am not in the business of making children brave in rooms they shouldn't have to be brave." He suspended visits. Not a pause. A full stop until proof of treatment with a licensed provider, not a church buddy and a workbook. No phone calls. No letters. No third-party gifts hand-delivered at school. My ex's lawyer tried to argue parental alienation and judicial bias, and the judge held up a hand like a traffic cop and said, "Sir, I have an audio file of a 6-year-old asking her grandparents to believe her. We are done with theory." My ex leaned back in his chair, tried that half smile he thinks is charming, and the muscles along his jaw twitched like something under his skin was bored of pretending. He violated the order again the following Sunday like he couldn't help it. He sent a note to my daughter through a girl from youth group, a folded piece of paper with a corner stained by a coffee cup. "Remember who loved you first," it said. It told her God forgives liars who do the right thing eventually. The girl's mom found it in her kid's backpack, read it once, and handed it to me in the church parking lot because small towns are sneaky like that. They know how to survive us. I sent a photo to my cousin and then drove the original to the sheriff's office. Monday afternoon, a deputy and my cousin walked into his mother's church during a weekday prayer circle and walked him out past a table of butter cookies and devotionals. No bananas this time. Hymnals and handcuffs. Someone gasped, someone prayed louder, and my cousin kept her face like stone. They kept him for 14 days on the violation. Not forever, not even long enough to feel like anything but a speed bump, but my house had the kind of silence you can nap inside. The kids ate pancakes on a Wednesday night and nobody looked at the window when a truck slowed out front. In the middle of that, my daughter's name change hearing lands on the calendar. Small wood-paneled courtroom, a judge with kind eyes who wears sneakers under the robe. My daughter had braided her hair again and insisted on the glitter Crocs. The judge asked her to spell it how she wanted it. She spelled my maiden name without looking at me once, then added, "And I want Pepa's name too, if I can, because he shows up, and that matters." The judge smiled with his whole face and said, "It does." When the clerk handed her the stamped order, my daughter held it up like a boarding pass to a flight she'd been waiting for since she could talk. My son tugged my sleeve and asked if he could have Pepa's name as a middle name one day. He said it like a wish whispered into a birthday cake. I told him wishes like that are paperwork, and paperwork we can do. We celebrated by driving to the river where my father-in-law says he's living now. Little rental with a porch that looks at water and time. He came outside before we parked, hands up, palms out, like you do with skittish animals and children who have earned the right to run. He had 2 fishing poles leaning against the railing and a tackle box older than me. My son walked toward him while keeping one hand on the side of the car. My daughter stood shoulder to shoulder with him like a small bodyguard. He didn't reach. He just sat on the top step and talked about how the river looks after it rains. We stayed for an hour. Nobody mentioned his wife. Nobody mentioned my ex. He told us he'd filed papers with a sheriff's return already on them. He said it quiet and then looked like he might throw up from the relief. He handed my son a bobber and my son held it in the sun and said, "It's a clown nose," like it was the funniest thing in the world. He caught a bluegill from the bank and screamed like it was a dinosaur, and my father-in-law laughed. Not the apologizing laugh he used to do. An actual laugh that shook his shoulders. On the drive home, my daughter said, "If he keeps doing that, I might forgive him. Not now. But maybe." She said it like a secret she told the sky instead of me. The store took its own shape without my ex stomping across the produce. Under new management wasn't just a sign. My uncle-in-law started a scholarship in Granny's name for kids going into social work or special ed. He didn't ask me to show up to a ribbon cutting. He just mailed a photocopy of the flyer and wrote, "Thought it might make you smile," and it did, a real one that hurt my cheeks. He also sent a notebook from the office safe, spiral spine, covers curled at the corners. Inside were time cards with my ex's initials scratched, notes in his mother's handwriting about sick days that lined up with nothing but holidays and drama. I handed it to my lawyer. He sent a copy to the DA with a cover letter that sounded like a lullaby if lullabies were made of statutes. There was one more tiny courtroom, by the way. Not the one with fights and lists, but a judge with the same quiet voice he uses when he thanks jurors. He extended the order of protection to 5 years without me having to open my mouth. The guardian ad litem said what needed to be said and my daughter said no one touches me and my son nodded at nothing in particular and the judge wrote and wrote until the page was done. He ended with no further contact by any means whatsoever, including but not limited to churches, charities, or school events. He underlined churches like he'd learned something new this month too. We got home from that and found a package on the porch with no return label. My stomach dropped and then my dad stepped in front of me like a human boulder. My cousin came over with gloves like she always has them in her purse and opened it on the driveway. Inside there was a blank journal and a card with my daughter's new last name on the front, nothing inside but a verse about endurance, printed, not handwritten. Maybe it was from someone kind, maybe it was from someone who thinks pity is a present. We took pictures. We put it in a bag. My daughter said, "I'll buy my own notebooks," and dragged me to the store for one with bees on the cover. At school drop-off the next morning, my son waved at the SRO like they were old fishing buddies. My daughter didn't scan the parking lot. She adjusted the straps on her backpack and walked in like a kid who belongs to herself. The secretary saw me in the line and reached across the counter and squeezed my hand and said, "We've got you," and I believed her. There's more moving behind the scenes. The DA called my lawyer about possible charges that will use old hospital records and new words. I won't say more here because some things deserve to be said once, to the right person, not practiced in the mirror of the internet. What I will say is this: my house has a new noise at night. It's my son humming off key in the shower on purpose. It's my daughter dragging a pen across paper that has her own name stamped across the top. It's my dad burning pancakes and swearing at batter. It's my phone sitting quiet on a table, face down, not a bomb anymore. It's the sound a door makes when you lock it and the lock holds. It's small. It's everything. Quiet ran out at 2:07 a.m. The doorbell didn't chime. It buzzed the way it does when it's pressed too long. Red and blue brushed the curtains like somebody was painting the room with a siren. My dad was already up because he never stops doing that thing where he listens for ghosts. He stood in the hallway in his socks with his palm flat like he could hold the house steady. 2 officers on the porch, hands at their sides, apology already on their faces. "Anonymous welfare check," the taller one said. My son woke up anyway, of course he did, and patted out with his blanket high on his chin, eyes blinking into the light. My daughter didn't come out. She texts when she's scared now. "Are we safe?" I typed yes with my thumb. The officers walked the rooms because they have to. They saw watermelon shampoo in the shower and a 12-year-old's glitter Crocs by the door and a grandfather who would put his back to a tank if it tried to roll into this house. The tall one said, "I'm sorry. We'll note it." I could smell cold air and the drop of coffee on his cuff. When they left, my cousin called before I even put the chain back on the door. "Already flagged," she said. "Spoof number. Same pattern. Document it." She talks like a metronome when she's trying not to get mad. By noon the DA had my lawyer on the line. "Grand jury Thursday," he said, like he was ordering lunch and a thunderstorm at the same time. "We're moving." The kids had already been to the Child Advocacy Center once, quiet rooms painted like cotton candy and a fish tank someone loved too much. They didn't go back for that. Thursday was not for them. Thursday was for everyone else who should have listened sooner. I sat in a hallway with a vending machine that spit nickels and my cousin stared at a wall like she could see through it. The teacher showed up with a cardigan with tiny apples on it and a voice that could tuck a stadium into bed. The ER nurse came in her scrubs with her hair in a bun like justice was a shift and she was clocking in. My father-in-law wore his fishing hat to a courthouse because he doesn't own anything that feels like a costume. He stared at the floor until it was his turn. No one looked at me because that's the rule, you pretend the waiting room doesn't hold you together with string. The DA came out 2 hours later with a paper like it wasn't fire. He said "True bill," and then he said the words out loud that we'd all been writing around. Injury to a child. Violation of protective order, enhanced. The hallway sounded like it exhaled. My cousin squeezed my wrist one time. Not a celebration. A hinge. They picked him up the next morning in a garage that smelled like hot dust and motor oil and a man who thinks a bench press can be a personality. I wasn't there. This isn't a movie. I heard about it in the way my cousin says he tried to sermon his way out, which means he did that low voice and that thing with his hands. He had the same creaky Bible tucked under a stack of tool catalogs. He asked if anybody wanted to pray. Nobody did. He went quiet when the cuffs were on. That part is always the same. His mother tried a new trick because she's run through the old ones so many times they're threadbare. She left a wicker basket on my porch, right up against the door where the mat says "Be kind like a dare." The doorbell caught all of it, her cane tapping, her whisper like theater. There was a crocheted doily draped over the handle and a card with my daughter's new name on the front, in block letters, misspelled. The basket weighed nothing. Inside, a thrift store picture Bible and a jar of store-bought jam with the label peeled off to look homemade. My dad opened the storm door and never moved past it. "Ma'am," he said, polite like a warning shot. "This porch isn't for you." She clutched her stomach and did the sigh and said the sugar word. A deputy pulled up like timing was a sport. She tried to slide to the ground in slow motion and the paramedics, because they are saints, pricked her finger. 98. One of them said, "You're within normal limits, the way you tell a kid the sky is blue." They gave her a trespass notice right there on the step. She signed with a flourish like she was at a book launch. When she turned to go, she bumped the planter. Dirt on the concrete like confetti. Arraignment. He stood behind glass like he was visiting himself in a zoo. The charges sound boring until you know what they mean. He said not guilty like a man trying on a jacket that never fit. The DA asked for bond conditions that read like a fence built higher than the sky. His new lawyer tried to pour honey over a landfill. The judge said no. The judge did more than no. 2 violations while you were in my orders, he said, voice like a file on steel. Then a grand jury. Then a welfare call at 2 a.m. This is not a man who restrains himself. He set bond but wrapped it so tight it may as well have been a cell. GPS ankle monitor, home confinement at his mother's address because that's what he listed, third-party custodian who isn't his mother, which meant he had no one, and a condition that he not leave the house to step onto a porch for air. And this is the last time, the judge added, and the room believed him. 2 days later he left the house to smoke. It was on the ankle monitor report like a heartbeat. The pretrial services officer didn't blink. "Judge?" she said into a phone. The judge didn't either. Bond revoked. They went back and got him at the bottom of the front steps, cigarette still burning in the grass, and this time no one prayed louder to drown out the sound of procedural steps. He went in orange without a Bible because they keep those inside. The school didn't wait on any of it. The principal called me into her office and slid a piece of paper across the desk like it was a secret code. Safety plan, locked in with signatures, mine, hers, the SRO, the bus coordinator. She had a calm voice that could stop a dog from running into traffic. My daughter helped write parts. She asked for different drop-off lanes and code words. She picked sunflower because my son keeps painting them. My son needed to walk the perimeter of the school with the SRO so he could see the entrances and put his hand flat on the doors and decide which ones made him feel like he could breathe. Soft hold is now a phrase our whole town uses like a cousin's name. The secretary wears her hair in a bun that looks like a gavel now. We're all becoming new things. Church tried to reinvent itself too. A deacon called my lawyer, not me, because he got wise, and asked to meet. He didn't want coffee. He wanted to hand over a letter he'd written on church stationery that said, in gentle font, that they had removed my ex and his mother from any role that ever let them hold a key or a microphone. He said he had listened to the audio. He said he had a granddaughter. He said he was sorry he ever let anyone put the word ministry over a hole in the ground and call it a well. He gave the letter to the DA too. It went in the file like a page that should have been there all along. My father-in-law keeps surprising me like it's a job. His divorce was final on a Wednesday with rain that made the river look like it was pulling its own blanket higher. He sent one text to me, "It's done." Then he sent another to my daughter, "I'm attending a group Tuesday nights. For men who were quiet when they shouldn't have been. No selfies from the parking lot. No look at me sorrow." Just a sentence that fit inside a father who is trying. When we drove out that weekend, he had a John boat tied to a stump like it might float away if he blinked. My son put on a life jacket that made him look like a marshmallow and climbed in with his brave boy face on. My daughter sat on the bank with a book and watched like she was guarding a small king. They pulled in a catfish big enough that my son's eyes went cartoon round. He yelled dinosaur again because he doesn't have a catfish word yet, and my father-in-law laughed like a man who forgot he had a laugh and just found it in his pocket. We had a tiny hearing I didn't know I needed. The judge with sneakers extended the protective order to 5 years and added words I didn't know judges added. "No drones," he said, "eyes on my ex's lawyer because apparently somebody tried to get creative. No recorded or live transmissions aimed at their residence." He said no drones like he was ordering God not to send a storm. He underlined it. My daughter bit the edge of her lip and then let it go. CPS closed a file that had my name on it for years like a shadow. They mailed a letter that said no services recommended for mother or children at this time. It came on a Tuesday with junk mail and a coupon flyer. I pressed the letter flat as if it was going to wrinkle itself into a new problem if I didn't hold it down. My son made a paper airplane out of the coupon for laundry detergent and hit my dad in the shoulder, and my dad pretended it was a heat-seeking missile and fell into the couch with a groan just to hear my boy laugh. My daughter took the CPS letter and put it in a plastic sleeve in a binder with her new name on the front, because she files victories like they are baseball cards. He tried one more thing from inside, always one more, because jail phones make men think they're smarter than recorded lines. He had a friend call my phone and leave a message that said we might have misunderstood the order, and then the friend said my daughter's new name out loud like it was bait on a hook. My cousin didn't even bother sitting down. She took it to the prosecutor who took it to the judge who looked like a man trying not to sigh for the billionth time. A contempt hearing is just paperwork that tastes like steel. 30 more days in. The judge said, "I am not going to keep explaining the English language to a grown man," and then looked down at his pen like he was bored with his own signature. There were small things that felt bigger than any of that. My daughter tried out for the school play and walked onto a stage without scanning the exits like an animal who's been hunted. She read a line and forgot to be careful with it. She got a part that isn't a lead but has a joke in it that made her laugh when she practiced at the kitchen sink. My son ate a blueberry muffin without peeling it entirely into its ecosystem. He still won't eat a blueberry by itself. He said, "The muffin did the work," like he was complimenting a teammate. He takes showers now with the speakers blasting songs that sound like robots fell in love with bird calls. He hums on purpose. He leaves the door ajar and the steam curls like a question mark. Sometimes he shouts "brave boy" and I shout "brave mom" back from the hallway and my dad yells "brave pep" and we all laugh like we're being too loud in a library and no one is going to shush us. The store, always a character in the background, did something I didn't see coming. My uncle-in-law hung Granny's photo by the register with a brass plaque that says "For Children and the Truth." That's it. No sermon. He started a donation jar for the scholarship under it and it filled up with crumpled bills and coins and a folded check from a woman who used to sing next to my ex's mother in the third pew. The jar sits next to bananas that are just bananas. My cousin told me a boy in a football jersey bought a soda with quarters and put the leftover 2 quarters in the jar, without looking around to see if anyone saw. She tells me the things that matter. She also handed off an office spiral notebook to the DA with the kind of quiet ceremony you give a photo album. Timestamps. Sign-in sheets. It made a shape. I got a call from the DA's investigator that started with "hey," because he's human, and ended with dates I wrote down twice. Pre-trial conference set. He said the words offer and no offer and felony and then said, "I won't ask you to make this decision today. Or tomorrow. I'm going to talk to your daughter's therapist." I wanted to hug his voice through the phone. There are people who stand in places and do their jobs like it's oxygen. The last thing, the one that felt like the universe took a step into my kitchen and said, "Look," was this: my daughter came home from school with a book she picked out on purpose from the library. It's about a girl who changes her name and then plants a garden because when you name things you get to decide what grows under them. She dropped it on the counter next to a note from the school nurse about vision screening and a permission slip for a field trip to a planetarium. "I want to see fake stars in a fake sky," she said, like a prayer that wasn't about heaven at all. She laughed at herself. Then she put the permission slip in front of me and said, "Sign it," and I did, and the pen didn't shake, not even once. My phone stayed face down all night. No buzz that made my heart run into walls. The house made its new noises: shower singing, fan clicking, my dad burning pancakes on a Thursday just because, and when I locked the door, it clicked and held, a sound so ordinary it could make you cry.